let's get started. Hello and welcome to This is Recruiting and welcome to our webinar today. If you're joining us for the first time, This is Recruiting is a webinar series that we conduct at Hackerearth, where we bring industry experts in different recruiting fields, HR, talent acquisition, sourcing, etc., to talk to us about their experiences in the field to help us cope with some of the challenges that we're facing and to address proper common issues that are happening in today's life. So if you're hearing about us for the first time, if you're new to Hackerearth, we are a tech recruiting platform that basically play matchmaker to developers and engineering managers and technical recruiters. We take care of your entire life cycle of technical recruiting, from attracting and sourcing to screening, interviewing, and upskilling as well. So we can help you reduce your hiring efficiency, reduce your hiring life cycle by over 50%. We help you increase your hiring efficiency. And we have a bunch of cool products that are there on our platform. We have assessments, coding assessments with real-time problems and problems that deal with real life events that are happening. We also have blockchain coding, which is a new thing that we're currently experimenting with assessments. We also have hackathons that are there, which can help you upskill and continuously engage your developers. So if you'd like to check out any of our products, do visit hackerearth.com/recruit. You can find the link right there. Since we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year at Hackerearth, we are giving all our webinar attendees today a 20% discount on all our products. I will put the link to that shortly. But before we get into any of that, let's get into the main event for today. I am super excited to have Tejal Wagadia here with me today to talk about something that we've received a lot of reviews on, which is a pretty important topic, on her tips to hire neurodiverse talent for 2022. So I'm going to give it over to Tejal, and Tejal, you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience so far.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's been an honor, a pleasure to be here. So I have been a recruiter, oh dear God, since 2013. I want to say, I always forget whether it's 2013 or 2012. I started as an HR specialist in a small home healthcare agency. It was more of a generalist role. And then the company was going under, so I got laid off. I moved across the country, moved to Arizona, and started working as a agency recruiter, I think in 2014. And I have just been, in the first few years, I went back and forth between agency and corporate, and then realized that I really just loved internal recruiting a lot more than anything else. And in 2018, I moved over, and I haven't looked back since. So that is my recruiting background. Not even a year ago, I want to say about 8 months ago, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which was no surprise to anybody that knew me, because a lot of people were like, "You didn't know you had ADHD?" I'm like, no, I did not know I had ADHD. I, for the longest time, didn't believe ADHD was a thing. And as I did more and more research, I realized how much neurodiverse people are kind of at a disadvantage when it comes to hiring and when it comes to being recruited. And the more I realized to make it more inclusive, because DEI is important, but DEI is also important from a perspective of neurodiversity, because no two humans are alike. And the more research I did, the more I realized that most hiring is done for neurotypical people. Your extroverts, the people that will make eye contact, that will speak very eloquently, and that will be able to answer the question with just enough information that you need. And that's the way most companies hire. And part of being an extrovert myself, and part of making friends with my coworkers and my candidates, I have learned over the years that most of my friends are in some way, shape, or form neurodiverse. And the more I talk to them since my diagnoses, the more I realized how much they are at a disadvantage. And so I started asking them, I'm like, hey, what would you want instead? Like, how would you want to be interviewed, or how would you like to be communicated with? Because hiring is not just external, right? Sometimes we hire internal people as well. And
Right.
some things that they told me is like, people expect the interviewees to make eye contact, which is not always feasible, which is not always possible. Not everyone is good at making eye contact. So looking for somebody that will make eye contact is at a disadvantage for the neurodiverse person. Looking for somebody that will always speak succinctly and eloquently is also not going to land you the right candidate or the best possible candidate, because you're only evaluating them on their communication skills.
Right.
And the other thing is, this is pre-COVID, or maybe, one day we'll get to a world maybe where we meet people again in person for interviews, like handshakes, right? We've always been taught a good handshake is a good, firm indicator of like your confidence. Neurodiverse people are not always showcasing their skills and showcasing their confidence in the same way neurotypical people do. So a handshake is not as important to them, or like, firming up that handshake is not as important to neurodiverse people, or they might not even know how to do it. They might think that what they're doing is just fine. It's the same thing with eye contact. They might, look down, or might just be, you feel like they're not communicating with you, or they're not connecting with you, where what they're trying to do is concentrate on the question that you've asked and answer that question. So looking for things that we look for in neurotypical people is a disadvantage to people who are neurodiverse. More than that, interviews, when we are doing interviews, it has to be more about their skills that they bring, rather than I know we all love talking about soft skills, but unless you have an objective metrics, you can't really evaluate a neurodiverse person's soft skills the same way you do a neurotypical person's.
Right.
So focusing more on the value that they can provide and the skills that they bring is more important when hiring neurodiverse people than anything else. Again, see, myself, like I have been rambling, I feel like, for the last couple of minutes. And that's normal for neurodiverse people, that, a lot of us do ramble when we get excited, or when we get nervous, or when we're like are super passionate about a topic. We'll just like talk on and on and on for hours on end, and you will not get us to shut up.
Yeah. I think whatever you said, is completely true, especially with skill-based hiring. I think, that is the keyword that we're focusing on as well. Like as an organization as well, I think that's something that we are looking at, which is why, with tech recruiting and stuff, we try to make it like objective in terms of the assessments and stuff also that happen. But, I think another big challenge itself that comes with, hiring neurodiverse people, and you might know this as like, a sourcer itself. So what are the top sourcing channels for neurodiverse individuals? You said, right, people are not always comfortable with maybe even, coming for interviews, or if they know, like straight off the bat, that this interview process is not going to be completely remote. It's going to be in person. Is that something that, would inhibit them from coming?
Yeah, I will say this, like I have hired plenty of neurodiverse people myself, and the sourcing channels are not any different than any like hiring just in general, right? It's still LinkedIn, it's still Dice, Monster, Career Builder, whatever the job board that you're sourcing out of. Mainly, I do LinkedIn sourcing. It's the way you approach them. Because sending out, I don't know if anybody else is on Reddit, on our recruiting hell, because a lot of candidates do post their LinkedIn recruiter messages on our recruit. I love reading those. Sorry, going off on a tangent there. But sending them a succinct message is always appreciated because, again, like I said, my friends that are neurodiverse have told me that they want to know a few things, right? Whether the job can be remote or not. If it's work from office, if somebody needs to go in the office, that's fine. Just make it clear what the company is, especially like when I used to work at an agency, like there's like a lot of back and forth on who the company is. And I get why agencies do that, but they want to know who the company is. And, talk about compensation, because I know I get a lot of flack for saying this, but we all work for money. We all work for a paycheck. If a salary is not going to make sense and not going to pay bills, it doesn't make any sense for us to have a conversation, right? Tell them whether you have the compensation range or not, or if you don't, if you have a company where you cannot disclose it initially when you get on a call, start talking about the compensation because that's important to them. Being clear, being straightforward, and being upfront is highly, highly recommended and highly preferred by neurodiverse people because they don't communicate the same way neurotypical people do. They don't beat around the bush. They don't, small talk is not always a thing for them. They just want to know what you want out of them, and they just want that answer. So give them that answer, and you will have much more success than like trying to beat around. So just get on a phone call with me. I'll change your life. That doesn't work with neurodiverse people. Like it just, their communication preferences are very different than the neurotypical people.
Yeah. So I think we have a question here that, something to get out of the way right away. Like, what are examples of neurodiversity other than ADHD? I think, that's something that recruiters also need to keep in mind when they're sourcing people, when they're sourcing individuals.
Yeah. Neurodiversity is, so the way, again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. From what I understand, neurodiversity is somebody that does not, for example, a person on the spectrum is neurodiverse. A person with ADHD is neurodiverse. A person with OCD, diagnosed OCD, is neurodiverse because they are not, their brain does not operate the same way as somebody that does not have those diagnoses. That's not, people often think, and there's a stigma around that there's something wrong with you if you're on the spectrum. There's something wrong with you if you have ADHD. There's something wrong with you if you have diagnosed OCD or any of the other diagnoses, right? It's not a disease. It's a condition where our brain does not function the same way as other people's does. And if you look up types of neurodiversity or neurodivergence on Google, you will find a whole list. Autism, Asperger's, all of these are part of neurodiversity where their brain functions differently than, say, somebody who does not have those diagnoses.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of people, especially in the US, I think have different spectrums of autism, like you said, right? And I think that is something that's common when you look at neurodiversity hiring. At least in the articles that are mentioned, most of them talk about, hiring different autistic individuals who function in different ways. But I think one thing that I've noticed, at least that's consistent across the board, is that people always talk about how the return that you get on hiring a neurodiverse individual is so much higher than you would believe. And I think that segues well into our next question, how do you measure the ROI of your diversity hiring program? That is something that at least a lot of our audience had asked before once we released this topic out.
Yeah, so I have an unpopular opinion on diversity hiring. You do not measure diversity hiring based on ROI. Diversity is not something that is, here's a thing that I have at DEI hiring. I am very much pro DEI hiring, but what ends up happening is they get the same KPI. Like we uphold the DEI hiring to the same KPIs as we do the non-DEI hiring. And it's not apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges, because hiring a DEI candidate takes a lot more focus, a lot more effort, a lot more the need to just like constantly be hitting a wall, figuring out what to do next, hitting a wall, figuring out what to do next. So trying to, figure out your ROI for diversity hiring in the same way and measuring it on the same KPI as you would do for your non-diversity hiring is you're doing, what's the word I'm looking for? You're not doing your recruiters and your sourcers and your candidates any justice. You need to look at the quality of the hire rather than the quantity of the hire, because often as sourcers and recruiters, we're measured on the quantity of the hires and not particularly the quality. So DEI needs to have a different type of KPI to look at, like, okay, you hired one diversity candidate. How many total candidates were you able to find? And looking at that conversion might be more effective than just like seeing, oh, you only hired one, whereas your colleague without the diversity quota, not quota, but like the diversity band label put to that hired 5. Well, yeah, but look at the conversion, right? Like hiring, for all intents and purposes, and I hope I don't offend anybody, straight white men as engineers versus hiring black men as engineers or black women as engineers are two completely different talent pools. So you cannot measure them the same way. It has to be cognizant. It has to be more focused on what the pool looks like and like what was your conversion rather than what was your end result.
Right, and like you mentioned, quality over quantity at the same time. So we do have another question that's coming in. How would you... Sorry,
Rebecca, just one quick thing. And do not uphold your diversity hiring with time to fill metric. Time to fill should not be a metric for diversity hiring. I believe that time to fill should not be a metric in recruiting in general, but that's a different story. But if you are upholding them to time to fill, you're doing your recruiters a disservice, because they're focused now on like trying to shorten that time to fill and finding any candidate that will meet that requirement rather than the right candidate. Again, goes back to the quality.
Yep, definitely. So we have a question that's come in. How do you advise preparing interviewers to ensure that they stay focused on the skills rather than, just looking at other aspects? That's
Yeah, that is definitely a difficult one. The thing that I have done in the past that was super helpful is like, we look at the job descriptions. We have every interviewer, before they go into interview, look at the job descriptions and look at the person's resume and give them 3 things that they need to find out from whatever, and that would be based on like what panel they're part of. So if they are part of the technical panel versus the behavioral panel, that like the 3 things that they need to look out for in this candidate, and those 3 things are objective things. So if they're in the technical side, let's say we're hiring engineers, right? We are hiring C# developers, C#.NET developers. We need to find out objectively their coding skills on the technical side. That's what they need to find out. Everything else is secondary if they can answer the coding skill question, and not a textbook coding skill question either, because not everyone's going to remember the definition of every single thing that's out there, right? So have your interviewers, give them objective things to look for. That's how they're going to keep focused on the skills. And anytime when you talk about the candidate after the interview and they bring a non-objective metrics or a non-objective thing in the conversation, you as a recruiter, sourcer, hiring leader have to get the conversation back to being objective. Because if it's not about an objective metric, we don't want to talk about it. Like, oh, she didn't smile. He didn't smile at me. That's not an objective metric. They might just be nervous. Oh, they rambled a little bit. Okay, well, like, is communication or rambling that big of a part of this job? Like, if it is, let's talk about that. But if it isn't, why are we talking about it?
Right. I completely agree. I think objective metrics is such a huge keyword. And I think that's something that every recruiter needs to, drill it in, at least, because naturally we're all subject to biases every now and then.
Yeah.
Once we get past, we've covered the hiring, the sourcing bit of it, but let's talk, once we actually get in neurodiverse individuals, or even to attract them by creating like a more accommodative physical workplace. And I'm talking about, like you said, with handshakes, with like constant communication, with, would it be better for different kinds of neurodiverse people to have, or like for organizations to take note of their preferences? And, if they can accommodate it within the workplace, how do they go about that?
Yeah, I think it's a organizational, but also an individual thing, right? What I mean when I say that is that as an organization, organizations need to create training programs on how to accommodate neurodiverse people and different types of neurodiverse people. Me being a neurodiverse person with ADHD does not mean I know how to accommodate every single neurodiverse person out there, right? So understanding that communication is key. I'll share, this is more of an anecdotal situation than more than anything else. I have a really good friend of mine. Her name is Lindsay, and she and I became friends because we worked together at the same company. When I first started talking to Lindsay, I paid attention to the way she communicated with me. One time, like, I'm a very physical person. So like, I will like touch your hand or I'll touch your back or something like that. One time I try to touch her and she's like, nope, I don't like being touched. I'm like, okay, cool. No big deal. And ever since then, like, I did not like violate that boundary that she had clearly set for me. Right. So having that conversation and like seeing what they're paying attention to their nonverbal cues is going to be very important. The other thing is that before the webinar started, you and I were talking about this, is introverts versus extroverts, right? As an extrovert, I tend to take over conversations. I know that about myself, but I also know that there are a lot of introverts in my team that I've worked with, all of that stuff that I'm friends with. And I have asked them, I'm like, what is something that you wish extroverts would do better? Because there are all of these articles that say, hey, introverts, here's how to be a better extrovert. But there's not a whole lot of articles that say, hey, extroverts, here's how to accommodate introverts. We don't talk about that. The biggest thing for them is communication. When you're setting up a meeting, they need an agenda. They need to know what you're doing, why you're calling the meeting. If you're communicating via instant messaging, Slack, Teams, whatever it may be, don't say, hey, hit enter, and then type so the three bubbles pop up for them. That causes people anxiety. Say, hey, so-and-so, ask your question, and just send that message. And I've noticed that since I started doing that, this was in like 2017, 2018, like I got such great feedback. They're like, thank you for not giving us anxiety. Because every time somebody just says hi, it's an automatic anxiety inducing situation because we don't know what the other person wants. And like, we are just anxious sitting here. Like, what did we do? Why is this person sending me a message? Especially as a leader in recruiting, in HR, whatever it may be, we need to be more accommodating. Just send them that message. And ask them for their opinions. A lot of times introverts won't just speak up because they feel like they have something to add and they should speak up. That's an extroverted trait. Something that I've done over the years is like, if I know somebody hasn't spoken in a meeting, or I know that there's a person that is introvert that won't say anything unless I call on them, I will call on them. And they know this, and I have set this expectation prior to them. And I asked them, I'm like, hey, if you're in meetings, do you want me to call on you so you can share your opinion? And if they say no, then I don't do it. If they say yes, then I will call on them. So have that conversation prior to, because sometimes they might not be comfortable sharing their opinion in front of other people. They might send it to you and you can share it with other people, but give credit there if they are doing that. So just ask the other person, what is their preference? What would they like? What do they want out of the conversation? Because communication is not about you, it's about the other person.
Right. And like apart from this also, I mean, the chat thing was a great tip. I had no idea. I'm also a bit of an extrovert and I had no idea I was like causing this many people anxiety. Ooh.
Yeah. And as an extrovert, it causes me anxiety, especially when my boss is like, hi, I'm like, what do you want? Like, what did I do? Right? Like, it's anxiety inducing, isn't like, and I'm an extroverted person, but just saying that, hey, you know, hi, Rebecca, hope you're doing well. Can you please help me? Can you please send this XYZ thing to me? Or can you please help me with this? Just in one sentence is so much more effective than like the going back and forth. Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Like, you know, just ask the question.
Yeah, I think from an extrovert point of view, you're thinking, okay, you know, I don't want to sound too pushy. I want to just make it known that, you know, I care about things apart from just work here.
From their perspective, they just want to know what you need out of them, because again, a friend of mine shared with me, this is called the spoons theory, like how many spoons you have in a day. And sometimes especially for neurodiverse people, sometimes they like say like in a day I have 5 spoons, right? Every day I have 5 spoons, and how I allocate those 5 spoons is up to me. And if my emotional allocation on one of the spoons is heavier because I had this like very much a back and forth conversation when I don't like back and forth conversation, and I'm a straight shooter, I don't like small talk, then like I'm not just using 1 spoon, I'm using 4 spoons and I only have 1 left for the rest of the day. And that's exhausting for neurodiverse people. So think about it as a spoon, and try and figure out how many spoons you're requesting out of this person, because you might not think you're requesting that much out of that person, but in reality, you are doing that.
Right. And I mean, these are great examples for like the smaller things that, you know, a lot of other people can keep track of, and, you know, managers and things like that. But what about when it comes to actual physical locations? What if you have people who are, you know, comfortable not working, like say in cubicles together, or would like to, you know, work on their own or work with people, and it's 2 separate things there also, right? With introverts, with extroverts. And what I've heard a lot is that some people are always worried about, you know, how do I accommodate everyone here? Do I, you know, take care of everyone's needs? If I do it for one person, I have to do it for everyone else too. So how would you advise, you know, people and like especially HR leaders in setting up workplace culture and things like that to, you know, set this sort of culture, or have it inbuilt at least in the company and surroundings also?
Yeah, I think asking the individual will be the most effective thing. Having a flexible environment is going to be your best friend, right? And what I mean by that is like, there's this great big debate of work from home, work from office, fully remote, not fully remote, hybrid, whatever the case may be. And I've always been a big proponent, even though I'm an extrovert, even though I loved going into the office pre-pandemic and like whatnot, I've always been a big proponent of people having the choice. So whether the choice is that they can work either fully remote, they can work from the office full time, or they have the flexibility of coming and going whenever they need to, that has to be the individual's choice based on their situation. Because like right now, if you were to ask me if I were to go into the office a couple days a week, I would say no, because I'm accustomed to working from home. Like I'm either like a work from home or work from the office full-time person. This like going back and forth couple days hybrid, it does not work for me. Again, it is part of my like my brain being neurodiverse. Like it has to be one or the other. It cannot be in the middle. So whether somebody is what is going to work for an individual employee, you are only going to find out by asking that individual employee what's going to work for them. If it works for them that they like coming into the office a couple days a week, sure, like accommodate that. If they like just working fully remote and maybe coming in like once a month or once every other month, it's our job as a recruiting and HR leader to accommodate our employees and the way they work best as employees. It's not up to us to tell them, hey, you will work better if you work from home all the time. You will work better if you work from the office all the time. I think that's where we kind of struggle. Like, ask them what works best for them.
Yep. Awesome. So apart from that, I mean, we did touch upon this in, while discussing this entire topic. Your tips on conducting sensitivity training at the workplace, like you said, right? It's not just up to the hiring managers. It's also with the individuals and your employees. That also plays a big part of it. What would you highlight in sensitivity training when talking about hiring for neurodiverse individuals? What are things people need to know?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, my Apple Watch had something to say. When you're conducting sensitivity training in the workplace, it's very important to bring in experts. And what I mean by that is a lot from what I have seen and what I've heard and from the people I've communicated with, a lot of times sensitivity training is done by HR. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Especially in smaller organizations, you don't have the budget to have an entire L&D department, right? But when you are talking about these kinds of trainings, looking up articles or watching TED videos is not enough. You need to communicate with experts, whoever those experts might be, and see if you can get some insights on how to do it, right? If you're looking for DEI training and to incorporate that into the sensitivity training, you need to find a DEI leader that has done this for a long time. If you're talking about neurodiversity, maybe reach out to a psychologist or a psychiatrist that has worked in this field for a long time and ask them, hey, how does this make sense? What can we do to accommodate neurodiverse people? So bringing in those opinions and those strategies from those experts will be more helpful than just looking up a couple articles or a couple of training videos from wherever they may be, or even engaging with a training company, right? Yes, they might have the expertise, they might have a good training program, but they might not have the right training program for every single situation that is possible. So before you bring in a training partner, external training partner, try and identify what their specialty is. Because if they don't have a specialty, and if they tell you that they can give you all of the sensitivity training, neurodiversity, DEI, how to hire for neurodiversity, how to lead people that are of different backgrounds than you. That to me is a red flag, because no company has figured that out yet. I wish they had, but they haven't. So bringing in different experts and different voices to create your own training might be more helpful. And it is work. It absolutely is work. There's no denying the fact. I will not say, oh, it's so easy, just reach out to the people. No, it's work. It is a lot of hard work. It is a lot of upfront time and effort that you're putting in, but it is worth it, because your people will feel that they are seen and they are heard, and that's what matters.
Right. And, like you said, the couple of tips that you had in terms of, like you said, your friend Lindsay, who didn't like to be touched, or, your own experiences itself. I think communication there is also such a huge is so important. Like teaching your employers that, you don't just follow one set rule for everyone here. You need to be mindful of what the other person feels, or at least, listen to them, things like that. So yep. I think you had a great couple of tips with like a lot of, from sourcing, from like actually hiring and how workplace accommodation and everything starts. And I think you gave us a lot of tips that came in, from your experiences being a neurodiverse person and stuff. So what about your experience with hiring talent? How have you experienced dealing with the talent pool. I think that's like a common thing that is around when you talk about neurodiversity, that it's an untapped talent pool as such. So how have how have you tapped into it, basically?
Yeah, so my biggest thing when I'm sourcing is communication. I ask my candidates how they like to be communicated with, and I give them that option. Every time I get on a call with a candidate, I'm like, listen, this is my cell phone number, this is my email address. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I am available through all of these avenues. Text me, call me, email me, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. And I tell them, I'm like, whatever works best for you is how you communicate with me. And I'll share with them, I'm like, the quickest response, if you want the quickest response, I respond quickest by text. And that's what I set up my expectations and I ask them what their expectations are. So I'm like, if you want to call me, please do so. If you want to text me, please do so. If you want to shoot me an email, please do so. It is up to you. And that's hiring neurodiverse talent is all about communication, because if you don't know their communication preference and how they like to be communicated with, you're not going to be able to make that connection. It's going to be that authentic, genuine connection. It's going to be a little bit superficial. So whether it is about, emailing, how often do they email, or how often should they email, or whether it's about texting, however they like to be communicated with is how you should be communicating with them. Because I will say this, I am not a person that will look at emails and respond to emails very quickly. I'm more of a phone call or a text person. And that's the quickest way to get a response out of me. And I tell, whenever I'm searching for a job and there's a recruiter, I tell them that. I'm like, hey, if you email me, I will get back to you within 24 hours. But if you have something, text me or call me. And I set the same expectation with my candidates as well, is have that conversation with them early on. During your first conversation, during your first call, have that conversation with them. Ask them what their communication preference is, and they will tell you. They will absolutely tell you how they like to be communicated with, because they don't want to, again, it's about the spoons, right? They don't want to spend emotional energy on one of the spoons when they can spend that on another spoon. You're asking for too much. So just ask them that.
And in terms of benefits that you've seen so far with hiring neurodiverse individuals, and, just personal anecdotes on how you've seen, the benefits itself that have come so far.
Yeah, I will say this. So I'll speak more from an ADHD perspective, because that's what I've done heavy research on. The great thing about hiring a person with ADHD is that we have hyper-focus modes. And if we are in our hyper-focus mode, we will get everything done in our task list. And at least once every 24 hours, typically we go into a hyper-focus mode. If I can get done my entire to-do list in 4 hours span, and if I get on the hyper-focus zone, there is nothing that can stop me. I will not get up off my seat. That's just the reality of it. I will not get up off my seat. So there's a lot of getting a lot of value within a short period of time that you can get by neurodiverse people, right? There's also they look at things differently. And I don't mean to say we look at things differently. We analyze things differently from someone else. So when you hire a neurodiverse person, you're hiring somebody that does not look at things the same way as you look at it. And that also differs from neurodiverse person to neurodiverse person, right? I'm going back to my friend Lindsay. She looks at things very differently than I look at things. And when we're talking about things, it's two different perspectives. And it's not an argument, it's a discussion of hey, this is how I see it. How do you see it? And she'll say the same thing. I'm not a coder, but she'll send me messages about her coding adventures because she just got into data science. And I'm like, oh, that's super cool. It helps me see things differently because she sees them differently. So having that different perspective, somebody that looks at it not from the same view or glasses, as I like to call it, like not from the same glasses as you do, is super helpful when solving problems, because sometimes we all get stuck, we all get hit a wall, and that's normal. And when you hire people that think differently from you, especially neurodiverse people, you are hiring somebody that will provide you a different perspective on a situation that you might not have even thought about.
Yeah, and like having different perspectives is always a great thing to pretty much like a recipe for success there.
Exactly.
So I'm going to open the floor up to our audience now. If anyone has any questions, please put it on the chat box or in the Q&A box here, and we will get to answering it. Okay, we have one question again on skill-based hiring. So
wasn't that the original question from the question and answer?
Yep, that's one. And I have another one
okay.
to me, I think, personally. Okay. On skill-based hiring, how do you ensure that hiring managers are hiring for skill? It's, I think, a little bit similar to the previous one itself. So, if you could just highlight that again. When it comes to skill-based hiring, again, like I can speak from like a coding perspective, but I think from, non-coding at least, when we're looking at coding, we look at assessments, we have like, objective tests that are just there. We have like, different preferences for tests and stuff as well, real world problems, all that stuff. But how do you deal with skill-based hiring from a non-coding perspective?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they're going to be having the expectations set up front with the hiring manager, right? When you go into the meeting or when you get the job description from that hiring manager, you need to ask the question from your hiring manager, what are the most needed skills? What are the top 3 to 5 skills that are absolutely needed? And those need to be objective. Again, it goes back to like, say we are hiring, we won't talk about coding or engineers. We'll say we are hiring an accountant, right? And we are looking for a CPA, somebody that has experience in gap analysis, and somebody that has done SOX compliance. And if your hiring manager says, these are the 3 things I need, when you go in and when you present candidates, when you go into the debriefs, post-interview debriefs, you need to challenge your hiring managers if they're bringing something other than those top skills, objective skills that they had originally told you about. It's like, why are we talking about accounts payable when that was not part of the job descriptions? Why are we talking about, I don't know, going public for the company when that was not an objective skill that we were looking for? So you need to hold them accountable for their own expectations, because they might they might like move forward and realize that they need this other skill set, but they need to communicate that with you. And if they don't communicate that with you, or even if they don't know that, then you need to push for that. It's like, what are we looking for? Because every hire that we make is solving a gap, is filling a gap on the team, in the company, whatever that might be, right? So what is that gap, that skills gap that we're looking to hire for? And that is going to be what you're looking for. And that's what you're going to hold your hiring managers accountable to. None of this, I did not like their personality. Okay, great. Like, culture fit is not a thing. I'm sorry, y'all. Culture fit is not a thing. I will always refuse to believe culture fit is a thing. It is another word to say we will hire people that are like us, and I don't believe in it. Culture fit is also not an objective reason. What does that mean? Can they define their team culture? Can you define your company culture? If you can't do that, then it's just a scapegoat. Hold them accountable. You are the expert in hiring. Why are you letting them push you around? Don't let them push you around.
We have another question here. Are references from prior colleagues especially important in neurodiverse hiring?
Nope. I do not my personal professional opinion is references are hot garbage. Excuse my French. because again, it's not objective, it's subjective. It's their experience with that employee, with that colleague, that is going to give, they're giving you from their colored lenses. They're not giving you objective metrics. They're not going to tell you objectively what this person was like, because again, if you're wearing rose-colored glasses, you're going to see everything in rose-colored lenses, right? If you're seeing dark-colored glasses, you're going to see everything in dark-colored lenses. So references are never a good idea because rarely do they give you anything objective. 99% of the time, they're not going to say, oh, don't hire this person. They're just the worst employee I have ever had. That's not going to work out. And the other thing is references, like, what are you looking for that your interview process did not tell you? Because if you are looking for references to confirm what you already know, why are you looking for that confirmation? You already know what this person is. You've already evaluated, said that this person was a good fit. If you're looking for somebody to disagree with you, again, I'll ask you, why are you looking for somebody to disagree with you? Or do you just want somebody to say yes, +1 your comment, in internet lingo, just +1 what you're doing. You don't need that. Have enough confidence in your own evaluation. Every hire is a risk. Every single hire is a risk, and some work out and some don't work out. And that is part of hiring, and that's okay. References are not going to provide you anything different than what you already know.
I've always had this question, do recruiters actually value references? Because I'm not a recruiter myself.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered, how important is it? I know that, some people get 2 references. Some people ask for, even more references from your prior employers and things like that. And, at least in the first company that I worked with, there were a lot of, there was a lot of disagreement as I was leaving because they were not very happy with me leaving. And I was just so terrified. Okay, are they going to give me a bad reference now? Is that going to be a thing? So I was very curious to know whether recruiters actually take that into account.
I think somebody just commented that I was very cynical, and their experience is different than mine, and that's okay. We all have our experiences. Their experience is different than mine. And in their experiences, references do provide objective metrics. In my experience, references don't provide objective metrics, right? So it depends on recruiter from recruiter. I also don't know if this person is an agency recruiter or an internal recruiter. As an internal recruiter, I've always pushed back on reference checkings. And I've had my leadership support on pushing back on reference checking. In an agency setting, absolutely, there are reference checks that are done, and agencies do put a lot of value into reference checks. It's also an industry secret, and that's not so much of a secret because from references, you can get leads to drum up more businesses. So there's also that part of that. If references are giving you you feel that the references that you're talking to are giving you objective feedback, go for it. In my opinion, I have never spoken to a reference that has given, sure, I can say that they were objective, but they haven't given me any information that I didn't already know from my interview with the candidate. They're just confirming what I already knew. So I just wasted 15 to 30 minutes of my time trying to do a reference, single reference, because that's how sometimes long it takes, 15 to 30 minutes. Now, typically people do 2 to 3 reference checks. So now I've spent hour and a half, close to that, to confirm what I already knew about the candidate.
So I think maybe it's a different point of view when you have if you're recruiting for a really senior person. In that case, maybe references do count, and it does matter when it's someone who could potentially be, say, the next CFO of your company or something like that.
I would still, as an internal recruiter, I would still say that references are not going to provide you anything different than what you know from the interviews. As an agency recruiter, sure. As an internal recruiter, not really. Sure, you can ask the people that you know, or you can do a reference check. But again, in my opinion, they're only confirming what we've already found out during the interview.
Yeah. So we have time for one last question. That's there. If anyone would like to ask anything else with respect to, neurodiverse hiring, whether it's any, experiences that you've had or something that you'd like to share, please let us know. We've also created, so we had a couple of different webinars with different DEI specialists. And while we haven't covered neurodiverse hiring yet, we do have a good playbook that we've created, a good ebook on hiring for diversity and inclusion. If you do have the time, please do check it out. I just put the link here in the comments. And yep, I think, we were probably not getting any other questions. If you do have any questions, you can always email us at Hackerearth, or, you can reach out to Tejal. You've probably seen her on LinkedIn because she's super active there. And I think, she's a big hit. That's a given. If you haven't followed her, go ahead and follow her right now. I can testament to that. I love her content. It is super quirky. It is super relatable also. I'm not even a recruiter and I'm like, yes, I relate to this. I know what this is. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us and giving us, so much valuable insights on. Yeah, thank you for everyone who attended as well. Again, just reminding you guys that we do have a special discount for our 10-year anniversary on 20% off on all our offerings. So that includes assessment and hackathons. I'm just going to put that link down here again. So if you are looking, to engage your tech talent, if you're looking to hire skill-based hiring only, check out our assessments platform, get, asking for a demo, and we will reach out to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Tejal. Thank you for joining us. This is a great session.
Thank you.
I love
thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And I really appreciate the platform you gave me to speak about neurodiverse hiring. I hope I was able to provide value. So thank you.
I definitely think it was a lot of value, especially great tips, from a person who hasn't engaged with a lot of neurodiverse people. I mean, I probably have, but I wouldn't have even known it because I wasn't really paying attention, like you said. Communication is key there. I think whether you're a recruiter or not, just being in a workplace, it's important to know most of this stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining, and those questions were wonderful.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much again, Tejal. Bye-bye.
Bye.